head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices like Era Medieval Age. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, we're going back to the medieval ages and we're going to be building our own city. We're going to be building hospitals and farms and universities and we're going to be walling them in, hoping that disease doesn't spread. Today we're checking out Era. This is from Plan B Games, designed by Matt Leacock, the same one that did Roll Through the Ages, Pandemic. I'm going to show you how this game's played and I'll see you on the other side. In Era, over the course of the game, you're going to be building up a city with all sorts of different buildings, with walls. You're going to be rolling dice to gather goods to then build these buildings. At the beginning of the game, everyone gets a player board, a castle in the middle, some walls, a farm, and some long houses. They can place them any way they want. They do this secretly, then everyone sort of reveals what their starting city looks like. And each player has one of these where they'll be building their own city. Now the game is played over multiple rounds. Each round goes through different phases. One player, whoever the start player is for that round, will be tracking that. And this actually shows you icons of the different phases. And no, it's not just hard to see on the camera, it's really hard to see in person as well. But let's go over this anyways. The first thing you'll do is the roll phase. Each player starts with 3 of the yellow dice and 1 gray one behind their shield. They'll roll the dice. Then, as long as it doesn't have a skull, they can re-roll it. So this one is sort of stuck because it has a skull. These ones we can decide to keep or re-roll. If you want to keep them, just kind of push them up there. If you want to re-roll them, you can re-roll them. You'll do this, keeping skulls and possibly re-rolling until you have a total of 3 rolls, which included the first roll there. So let's say after our second roll we have this. This one we have to keep because it has a skull, and these two are like this. And let's say we do one final re-roll. And let's say we rolled this, but we did not roll that. We wanted to keep it. And that's the end of the roll phase. Everyone's doing this simultaneously. Then everyone will go to the collect stage. You can do this simultaneously as well. Everyone's going to collect things. Like in this case, there's going to be a wood here and a wood here. In this case, this is wood, so you can collect 2 wood. And these actually do have numbers on them. Might be hard to see on the camera. A little hard to see in person as well. This one you could take a stone or 2 food. Let's just take a stone for the heck of it. And this last die might does some different things we'll talk about later. Now sometimes you'll actually get some things like trade goods which will make this go up, but in this case we'll hang on to this. Then everyone will simultaneously go to the feed phase, where for each die you have to use 1 food. So we have 4 dice, we only have 3 food, so we'd go 1, 2, 3, that's to 0, and because we couldn't feed one, we would go down on this little disaster track on the right. It has a little skull there. This essentially is going to be worth minus points at the end of the game for everybody that you can't feed. Then, starting with the start player, then going clockwise, each player is going to resolve their disasters. Depending on how many skulls you have, in this case we have 2, but depending on what you have, different things will happen. Like if we have 2, we'd go down that disaster track for each clustered building, meaning it's a disease, and each building that's sort of touching each other, we would have to go down. So you want to keep them apart. Of course, there's always different ways to combat that. We'll talk about that later with some of the buildings, but the worse, the worse it gets really bad for you. Like, hey, 4 is a fire, you lose a building. But hey, if you get 1 more, you actually attack an opponent's lose an unwalled building. But then if you have this many revolt, you lose all of your trade goods, which essentially is the best resource in the game. Then you're going to go to the build phase. Once everyone has done that disaster phase, start with the first player and going clockwise. Anyone that has a hammer, for each of those hammers, they can build something. Now to build something, it has the different structure name, what it looks like, sort of on your board, the color and how much space it takes up, and then what the cost is, and then what the different effect is, and how many points you'll get for this building at the end of the game. Now when you pay for something, you're going to just move it down on the different tracks of the different resources to keep track of it. And not only do they get you points, some of the buildings give you different dice. For example, the longhouse will get you another yellow peasant die. The townhouse will get you a blue die, and these die are better. There's going to be more ways to get the good trade goods. Sometimes you can have double build. This gives you culture, which moves you down this track, and it's basically 1 point for each spot that you're at here at the end of the game, and you'll get 5 points if you have the most. And the church gets you a clergy die, which is really cool because it has a feather, which allows you to re-roll this die and one other even after your 3rd and final roll. And you can even re-roll the skulls, which is really cool. So you can get some different dice that allow you to do different things. But remember, the more dice you have, the more you have to feed. Now, I didn't show you this during the collect step, but some of the buildings actually help you collect. For example, for every lumber mill you have, during the collect step, in addition to your dice, you're also going to get 2 wood. Same for the farm, you're going to get 1 additional food for each of those. The hospital it's adjacent to an immune disease. So if we got the disease here, any building adjacent to the hospital would not be considered clustered. Essentially, they wouldn't, you wouldn't go down the disaster track for that. And some of them have abilities, like the monastery. It's awesome. It's 4 points, and you get to set 1 die before your second roll. That's really cool. Now, there's buildings that give you points at the end of the game. The market will get you a point for every adjacent spot that's next to the market. The guild hall will give you a point for each of the different resources. University will give you an additional point for going down that culture track, and the cathedral will get you a point per die. Now, when you're building things, you're going to be taking them and putting them on your board, and as soon as any one building type runs out, you will flip one of these tokens over to the X side, and then once a certain amount of piles are completely gone, depending on the amount of players, that will end the game. Now, after you build, you go to the extort phase. Well, you look at the gray dice of the different players, and starting with the start player and then going clockwise, for every player that you have more swords of, you get to extort them and basically steal a resource from them: food, wood, stone, or a trade good. But if someone has more shields than you have swords, they're protected. So this player is going to be able to steal from this one, not this one. This one doesn't have any swords. This one just has defense. They're sort of protecting themselves. That's sort of how that works. Every player will do that in order, starting with the first player. Now, once the game ends, as I showed you earlier, everyone's going to add up their points on this sheet. Now, this is what your city might look like at the end of the game. I've got in here a bunch of buildings, and we've got it walled in. Now, you're going to get points for each of the buildings that you've built, and if it's completely walled in, like you see here, you'll get 2 times those points, and then you'll get the end game points for some of the buildings I already talked about, for the culture and the most culture and the most walled in area, 10. And then you'd subtract your disaster points, and whoever has the most at the end is the winner. All right, let's first start with the things I liked about the game, what it has going for it. The game definitely is going for and has great table presence. You walk up at people playing this, you're going to be looking at all the cool buildings, you're going to be looking at everyone's cities different. The presence there and the tactile feel of building something is one of this game's biggest strengths. It's a roll and build, which is an interesting twist on the roll and writes that are so crowding the market right now, that it's essentially a roll and write game, but instead of writing, you are physically building things. And if you like to physically build things, that's the main part of this game that I think, and the attraction that this game has. So if you like building those style of things, this might be the game for you. I like the pressing your luck Yahtzee style, trying to avoid disasters, but you might press your luck too much and have to take some. I've always liked that mechanism in pretty much every game it's used in, and I liked it here. I like the building the synergies of the different buildings, like building buildings that get dice that will allow you to do other things, and building hospitals that will allow you to just cluster up buildings to those and they'll be immune to disease and things like that. The townhouse gets more trade goods, for example. I like sort of comboing together different things and trying to make my city different every time, make it hum, make it run well. Getting the different dice was really fun. The clergy helps you re-roll, even the skull dice. The blue allows you to get those, more trade goods, which is great. I like that those give you different options and new things to do, but of course, once you get those, you got to feed more. So it's a nice trade-off there. I like trying to wall in those all your buildings for double the amount of points. At some point in the game, you can see how fast things are running out. People can try to rush the end of the game, knowing that you haven't really walled yours in. It gets a little bit tense down there. So the end of the game and trying to wall things in can get tense, and I like that aspect of it. I like the interaction of the players. Some players did not like the extorting, stealing from other players. I like it because otherwise it would just be multiplayer solitaire. So I like that aspect of it, placing scorches in different players' cities so they can't place things there. That timing of the end game is one of its strengths. Trying to figure out, should I rush it? This building would go good here, but I really don't want it to end yet because I haven't finished my wall, things like that. The solo mode works well. If you want to play that, it definitely is well developed. I did play it a couple times solo. It works fine. And I like the different building scoring strategies, The cathedral, one for each die. The university, one for each culture. Some end game scoring buildings that I think are cool as well. So that's it. So on the negative side of things, the player boards are awful. They're the ugliest yellow color. They're almost impossible to read, even in good lighting. And even knowing what those icons look like, it's almost impossible to read. I mean, you should probably have washed it or put some ink on there or something. They're really hard to read, but on the downside, it's not the end of the world because once you know what they do, you know what they do, but I wish those would have been easier to read. Also, the starting spot, again, do I have to count down 14 rows and put the thing down every time I play the game? Just mark the 4 spots that I put the starting thing in. It would have been a lot easier. Anyway, so the board production could have been better on that for sure. Definitely a detriment to the game, but again, once you know what you're doing, it's not that big a deal. This could have been a small roll and write game. But it's not. It's a big game, and that's how it's trying to differentiate itself. I see it. But it is an expensive game, though. MSRP is $70. On Miniature Market, it's around $50, maybe just under, something like that. And it's essentially like a bigger Roll Through the Ages with a lot more going on, a lot more to think about. But from a mechanics standpoint, you're really getting sort of a roll and write style game. But the cost comes with the production of it all, which I mentioned is one of its biggest strengths. So I think this is for somebody that likes roll and write style mechanisms, but also likes the tactile feeling of building something and standing back and go, wow, my city looks cool. Then this game has strong value for you. If you don't care too much about placing all those things and you'd rather just draw it out and things like that, then this game might not have the value for you. But that's up to you to decide. And also the last negative is I would like to have seen sort of a dice distribution player aid. Sure, in the rules it shows the distribution of the dice. I would have liked to see one on the player aid. And that's pretty much it. So you should have a good idea right now if you think this game is good for you or if it's a good value for you, and that is Era. Did you miss the Game Topper 2.0 Kickstarter? Have no fear, it's not too late to get in on the ultimate gaming accessory. Convert your table into a high-quality gaming table with a fully portable Game Topper system and take advantage of some of the best 3mm premium gaming mats in the industry. New styles, new sizes, and new accessories can be yours. Upgrade every game you play by late backing now at GameToppersLLC.com.